Namaskar, welcome to this session. We are dealing with the Purusha Tattva, Atma Chaitanyam, the principle of Drashta. And in the last session, we were considering that confounding aspect that the Kartatva is not mentioned in Purusha, but the Bhoktatva is mentioned in the Purusha. And we went for clarification of it through Panchashikacharya's interpretation and Sri Ramanujacharya's interpretation in Bhagavad Gita. So now today we proceed from there. The Purusha Tattva is Chinmatra and Buddhi is Jada. So Jada Chetanam, this duality can be cited between Purusha and Buddhi. Purusha Tattva is Chetana Tattva, Buddhi Tattva is Jada Tattva. Sentient, insentient. And Purusha is untouched by gunas, which are sattva rajatama, while Buddhi is materially of gunas. Buddhi Tattva is Prakriti itself, and therefore it is materially of sattva rajatama gunas, while Purusha Tattva is untouched by sattva rajatama gunas. The Purusha is Aparinami, immutable, and Buddhi is Satataparinami. The Buddhi is constantly changing and subject to changes, while the Purusha is not. Now, when these are so distinct principles, how is the aropa happening? How the imposition happening here? Because we have seen that there is aspect of imposition. So, how can there be Buddhi Purusha Ekakarata for which Buddhi Purusha Viveka is advised? Because we have seen in the last session that we don't impose elephant on rope, but we impose snake on rope. It is because elephant is dissimilar to rope and snake is similar to rope in the form. So, if it is totally virupa, the aropyamana will not be getting the aropita. So, when there is complete dissimilarity between the object imposed and object of imposition, then there is no imposition. We don't impose in such case when there is dissimilarity. Now here, we have just now seen the dissimilarity between the Purusha Tattvam and Buddhi Tattvam, complete dissimilarity. There is no touch of similarity, but then yet, how is that ekakarata? How does this imposition come about? Now this question is taken up by Vyasa in his comment. And then he says, he commences, Sa buddhehe na sarupo na atyanta virupa iti. Very true, he says. And therefore he makes a statement that this buddhi is not sarupa to Purusha Tattvam, not atyanta virupa to Purusha Tattva. Then how is it that the imposition comes about? So Vyasa says the objection is perfectly in place. These are two dissimilar things, and two dissimilar things are never in imposition. And therefore he says Buddhi is na sarupa, neither identical to Buddhi or Buddhi identical to Purusha, but not even atyanta virupa, not even absolutely dissimilar. So, point is there is no paramarthika sarupyam So there is no absolute similarity, essential similarity, substantive similarity, yet there is aparamarthika sarupyam. There is a virtual similarity, not actual similarity. Actual dissimilarity is beyond doubt, but there is seeming reality, aparamarthika sarupyam. Now, how is this? This is pratibimbataya, and that is why this reflection theory is very important, which will tell us about some metapsychological phenomenon. Without this reflection theory in place, we will not be able to have this aspect of imposition, that the non-soul is imposed on soul, or the soul is imposed on non-soul. This is not possible at all. And that is why Patanjali also in the sutra says Shuddha. That is Paramarthikataha Virupam. Api Pratyayanu But, he says, yes, Purusha is absolutely immaculately pure, Chinmatra. But this but also implies the reflection theory that was described. And this clarification is given by Vijnana Bhikshu on the statement of Vyasa, Sa buddhehe na sarupo na atyanta virupa iti. Now, Bhashyakara slowly starts explaining out in stages. So first he makes a statement that there is neither sarupyam nor atyantika virupam. So he commences, na tavat sarupaha kasmat gnata gnata vishayatvat parinamini hi buddhi. Not absolutely similar. What is not absolutely similar? Now the seemingly conscious buddhi is being considered, because we have seen that there is a phenomenon of inert buddhi becoming seemingly conscious, bhasamana chaitanyam. So no tavat sarupaha kasmat. Why not similar? Gnata gnata vishayatvat parinaminihi hi buddhi. The buddhi is sometimes knower and sometimes not knower. This bhasamana chaitanyam, which is buddhi, it is sometimes knower and sometimes not knower. Therefore, we have this condition, I sometimes know, I sometimes do not know. I know a part of it, I do not know the other part of it. So there is always a combination in our knowledge, there is always combination of known and unknown. Our knowledge is not always based on known. There is always unknown aspect in our knowledge, in our worldly knowledge. Known plus unknown is equal to our knowledge. This is a very interesting equation. Merely what we know is not our knowledge. Our knowledge is known plus unknown aspect about something. Because when we say we know something, it is not that we know that in toto. We do not know totally, completely. There is always a part of that knowable which is not known. So, Jnanam plus Ajnanam is our Jnanam, worldly Jnanam. There is always not known and there is something known. And with something known, we claim to be knowing it. This is our tendency, human tendency, biological tendency. So the buddhi is sometimes gnata and sometimes agnata. Gnata gnata vishayatvat. Gnata agnata vishayatvat. So sometimes the buddhi is with jnata dharma and sometimes the buddhi is ajnata dharma. That means when the buddhi gets knowledge of ghatapata adi worldly objects, they are sometimes known and sometimes not known. Many times the object is right in front of us, but we don't cognize it. It is usually we say, mind was engrossed somewhere else, and that's why I did not notice it. Anyway, the buddhi can be knower as well as non-knower. Sometimes knower, sometimes non-knower. And even when it is a knower, there is always a part of that object which is not known. If you know the front, if you see the front, you don't simultaneously see the back of an object. That's why the buddhi is parinama dharma yukta. The buddhi is parinama dharma yukta. Now if you rebut here saying that buddhi is sometimes jnata vishaya and sometimes ajnata vishaya, then why it should be considered as parinamini? On what basis? This is not a sufficient basis as felt by the questioner, that just because sometimes it knows and sometimes it doesn't know, or part of it is known and part of object is not known, it should not be considered as parinamini. Because in mirror, sometimes there is reflection and sometimes there is no reflection. So similarly, buddhi is like that, darpanavat. So here the answer is being given that the stand or the view that you have, that mirror sometimes reflects and sometimes doesn't reflect, is not true. There is a flaw in mentioning that. So let us keep the buddhi in place of mirror. Let us keep the buddhitattvam in place of mirror. And in that case, you will not be able to have this stand. Because in dhyana, swapna states of consciousness, there is vishaya bhava, there is no object. And buddhi is jnata dharma yukta. So when even an object comes at sight, it goes uncognized. And therefore, it is ajnata dharma yukta. But in case of darpana, that is never the case. Tasyascha vishayo gavadir ghatadir va gnata gnatascha iti parinamitvam darshayati. The buddhi sometimes knows the gava ghata adi padarthas, objects, worldly objects. Sometimes it knows and sometimes it doesn't know. And therefore, there is parinamitvam. Now, while raising the doubt, there was the analogy of mirror. And with mirror, it needs to be mentioned that mirror is ever, ever, ever reflecting something. Even if you wrap a mirror completely, even if the mirror is wrapped, the wrapper will be reflected in mirror. If you apply tar on mirror, the mirror is going to reflect the tar. The mirror will never cease to reflect. So the example with which one came with an argument, how the buddhi is jnata ajnata vishaya. So the example is set aside. The mirror will ever reflect, constantly reflect something or the other. If the mirror is kept in absolutely dark place that no object around can be sighted, yet mirror will reflect the darkness. If the mirror is wrapped with a very opaque material, mirror will continue to reflect the opaque wrapper. If you apply tar on the mirror, it will still reflect the tar coat. So, mirror is going to ever be reflecting. It will never cease to reflect, not even for a moment. So that also is to be understood. Similarly here, the reflection is a constant thing. But anyway, there's parinamitvam doesn't get refuted. The parinamitvam in buddhi is never getting refuted by any argument. So that is how the Buddhitattva is said to be parinamini. While the Purusha is not parinami in that sense, because Patanjali himself in the 4th chapter is going to say, and Vyasa has quoted that here, sada jnata vishayatvam tu purushasya aparanamitvam paridipayati. The Purusha is ever jnata, sada jnata, ever jnata of its buddhi. It will never cease to not know its subject, the buddhi. So Patanjali also in the 4th chapter has this mention, sada jnata chitta vrittayah tat prabho purushasya aparanamitvat. So Patanjali himself is mentioning this, that there is aparanamitvam, because the Purusha will be ever knowing the buddhi. Even if the buddhi has become unconscious, Purusha will be knowing it. If the buddhi has gone to sleep, Purusha will be yet knowing it, because he is sada jnata. It is because there is aparanamitvam, immutability, changelessness. So Patanjali in 4.18 has postulated this, and Vyasa quotes that here to prove how Purusha Tattva is aparinamini. Because its object is buddhi and Purusha Tattva is sada jnata. So, then proceeding to this postulation, the Purusha, what is the object of Purusha? The Ghatapatadis are not Vishayas of Purusha. They are objects of buddhi. The worldly objects are only objects of buddhi. They are not objects of Purusha Tattva. The buddhi has countless objects, all the worldly universal objects of the form of Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. Countless objects are there for Buddhitattva. But the Purusha has only one object. What is that one object? Its own buddhi. So, don't have confusion between objects of buddhi and objects of Purusha. Purusha doesn't have objects, plural. Purusha has only one object, that is buddhi. And the buddhi has plurality of objects, countless objects. So, and this is the point to be noted. The Purusha is not rambling. It has only one object, that is its buddhi, and that buddhi is in countless states, and countless are its objects. Now let's for a moment think that Purusha is also parinami, changeful. And because of inertia, etc., sometimes the buddhi, its object itself is unknown. Let us imagine if the Purusha has only one object, and sometimes because of some inertia, then the object of Purusha, which is buddhi, is unknown. And in such a case, if the ghata, pata, is coming in front of buddhi, then what will be the conclusion? That Ghatapatadis objects are not there. They will be null and void, no object at all. So there will be a possibility of modification of unknown objects also then. Like Aparinamini or Aparinami mirror is never without a reflection. As long as the mirror is mirror, it is going to reflect. If the mirrorness goes, then only it will not reflect. So, Vijnana Bhikshu quotes extinct quotation. न चित् प्रतिबिंबा अस्ति दृश्याभावात् दृके किल क्वचित् न प्रतिबिंबेन कीलादर्शो अवतिष्ठते. So he brings a quotation which is really the source is unknown. The Purusha Tattva does not have Ghatapatadi Drushya objects, and the Buddhi is never without an object, and therefore the mirror also will never be without a object for itself. Even when it is deluge, pralayam, the Buddhi will not have objects in deluge or pralaya, but the Purusha will continue to have its object, which is its Buddhi, that Buddhitattva or the Chitta. And that proves aparanabhitvam of the Purusha. So whether it is sargavastha, srushti avastha or pralaya avastha, the Purusha is not going to be free from its object. It will ever be knowing its object, which is only singular object, Buddhi. So Vyasa says, Nahi buddhischa nama purusha vishayascha syad grahitacha agrahitacha iti siddham purushasya sadagnata vishayatvam tatascha aparanamitvam iti. So because of this sadagnatratvam, there is aparanamitvam. So Vyasa says here that the Purusha's object is Buddhi, and it is never that sometimes it is known and sometimes not known, and therefore the Purusha has aparanamitvam. So the Purusha will always grasp its object, and this is the rupyam. So Vyasa has illustrated how there is sarupyam and there is vairupyam. Then he says, Kimcha paratha buddhi sambatyakaritva swartha purusha iti. Bhashyakara says that buddhi is independently working on its own by becoming bhasamana chaitanyam. So karma vasana, vishaya vasana, indriya vyapar, all these are its assisting factors, and therefore the Buddhitattva will be functioning. Although inert, it is now functioning, and therefore the Buddhitattva is said to be not swartha but parartha. It is meant for someone else. It is not meant for itself. It is meant for someone else. And this has been clarified by even Patanjali in his sutra later. So, Buddhi Tattvam should be considered as Parartha, while Purusha Tattva is considered to be Swartha. The Purusha is for itself, Prakriti is not for itself. The Buddhi is not for itself, the Buddhi is for Purusha. Yatra samvatyakaritvam abhava tatra swarthatvam bhavati. So also there is samvatyakaritvam. What is samvatyakaritvam? The buddhi is working with all various components such as indriya vasana, karma vasana, so various kind of tendencies, various kinds of objects. So it needs objects, it needs senses, and it needs band of things from vasanas to objects. So it is made up of components. And that which is made up of components is never for itself. It is always for someone else. When a thing is assembly of so many parts, it is not for itself. And this is a wonderful postulation that comes in Patanjala's philosophy, samvatyakaritvam, concept of samvatyakaritvam and pararthatvam. This samvatyakaritvam is interesting. Say, a machine like car has countless components. Many components come together and then you get something as automobile, a car. Now the car is never meant for itself. The car is meant for someone else, either the owner or the user. The car doesn't go for ride for itself by itself. Somebody will take a ride, somebody will need a ride, and therefore somebody will get mounted in the car and will drive the car. So the car doesn't have its own purpose. The car will always have purpose of a master, purpose of a user, purpose of one who is hiring it, buying it, owning it, using it. So also anything that is made up of components such as a chair, such as a cot, such as a table, it is never a one single part. It is composed of so many parts. There are components in it. And when something is made up of components, it is always for someone else. The table is not meant for table. The table is meant for someone. It is because table is made up of components. An object is made up of components. So, many parts. So, the buddhi is also made up of many parts. It is not an entity singularly by itself. It is composed of, constituted by several parts. That is samvatyakaritvam. So, the samvatyakaritvam means it is always for someone else. And the pararthatvam means it is always for someone else. So this is a wonderful postulation that has come. And Purusha Tattva is swarthaha. It is for itself. It is not meant for someone else. So our prakriti, our mind, our chitta, our Buddhitattva is meant for someone else. And that's why it offers darshita vishayatvat, which we had seen in the first chapter, Vritti Sarupya Sutra. So, anyway, the point is, there is swarthatva and pararthatva in buddhi and purusha. So that is again a factor of dissimilarity. So Vyasa says, Tatha sarvartha adyavasayakatvat triguna buddhihi trigunatvat achetana iti. So it is achetanam. While Purusha is chinmatra, drushmatraha, as Patanjali has already mentioned about. Now here Vyasa referred to something as sarvartha. Sarvartha adyavasayakatvat trigunaha buddhihi is his statement. Vachaspati Mishra interprets it that Shanta Ghora Mudhakara is always the condition of the buddhi. It will be either in Shantavastha or Ghoravastha or Mudhavastha. So it is transforming from one state or the other, which is respectively Sattvic, Rajasic, Tamasic, due to effecting into Shanta Ghora Mudha. So it is Shanta Ghora Mudhavastha. Shantaghora Mudha Vishaya. And therefore, we come to know that the buddhi is in either of these states. That's the adhyavasaya. So, Vachaspati says, Sarvan Arthan Shantaghora Moodas Tadakara Parinata Buddhi Adhyavasyati Sattvarajatamasam Cha Ete Parinama iti Siddha Triguna Buddhi iti. Therefore, it proves that Buddhi is Trigunatmaka while Purusha is not. So, that is the rupyam. So, Buddhi is Gunatmaka, is to be understood. And Gunatmaka Vishayas are objects of Gunatmaka Buddhi. And Gunatmaka Vishayas also effect changes in Gunatmaka Buddhi. And therefore, because of the objects which are Gunatmaka, Shantaghora Mudhavastha will come into Buddhi. So, that's the Vritti Sarupyam, and that is the Guna Parinama. The Purusha is never touched by Guna Parinamas. So, therefore, Vyasa says, Gunanam tu Upadrashta Purusha iti ataha na sarupaha. Therefore, not similar. Because he is only Upadrashta, he is recognizer. So he is Upadrashta of the Gunas. So there is Bimba Pratibimbam aspect as we have seen, and therefore, just as Buddhi is seemingly conscious, the Purusha is seemingly having kartrutva, bhoktrutva, jnatrutva. So that is how the Adhyatma explains this metapsychological aspect. And now the Buddhi has Sannidhyam. Buddhi is in proximity with the Purusha Tattvam, therefore these things are happening. Buddhi Sannidhyena Buddhi Vritti Pratibimba Matrato Gunadrashta Bhavati Na Gunakara Parinamena Buddhivatiti is a clarification of Yogavartikara, Bhikshu. The proximity between Purusha and Buddhi, there is Pratibimbam, and the Pratibimba Matratha Gunadrashta. Because the reflection, he becomes Gunadrashta and not Gunakara Parinamena Buddhivat. The Buddhi becomes Gunakara because it is Gunatmaka. But that is not the case in Purusha. That is the Vairupyam. So, Vachaspati's interpretation is also interesting. Tat pratibimbataha pashyati na tadakara parinata iti. So there is a seeming condition, not actual condition. This is to be understood. Now, the predicate of Upadrashta is brought by Vyasa here. Upadrashta, recognizer. And this term also has come in Bhagavad Gita 13.22. Upadrashta, Anumanta, Bharta, Bhokta, Maheshwaraha. So Upadrashta is also a predicate or description that Bhagavad Gita uses, Bhagwan Sri Krishna uses. Commenting on it, Srimad Adya Shankaracharya says something, it is like this. So in karma, he doesn't really get entangled, but just because of proximity. He is just onlooker as a proximal entity. That is the Upadrashta. Now, Bhikshu and Mishra, both the commentators, interpreters, they say Purusha Swarupatah Sakshi Matra. He is only witness. He is Sakshi Matra. So both are obsessed with the concept of Sakshitvam in Purusha-tattva. And these Shankara Matanuyayis are also embracing that concept of Sakshitvam. So it is very strange that although Vijnana Bhikshu is quite critical about Shankara Vedanta and Shankara Matam, we see that he is in collaboration with the Advaitins. So that's a strange coincidence that we come across. Very, very rare that Vijnana Bhikshu endorsing with Shankara Matam, but here he is seen endorsing. Now, this Bhagavad Gita predicate Upadrashta has been differently rendered by Srimad Ramanujacharya. So he says, Asmin dehe avasthito ayam purushaha deha pravrutti anuguna sankalpadi rupena dehasya upadrashta anumanta cha bhavati. While commenting on 13.22, he makes it different kind of interpretation to Srimad Adya Shankaracharya. So that samipatvam, proximity, is something because of which there is the chichayapatti. Now proximity always results into some chaya, some shadow or some reflection. Anyway, point is that there is neither complete similarity or complete dissimilarity between the two, and therefore the place for imposition. So the question has been now set aside as to how is that imposition when they are too dissimilar. So that has been now answered, saying that how it is possible that there can be imposition. So there is neither sarupya nor vairupya. Partially there is sarupya, partially there is vairupya. So this is what we considered in the session today. Now let us end the session today with this. We will be proceeding on this matter in our next session. So namaskar all of you.